Welcome to the Truetone Lounge. I'm your host, Zach Childs, and today our guest is Audley Freed.
It's great to be here, Zach.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for letting us in your home.
It's an honor for me.
Well, awesome. Audley has had an amazing career, from his time in his own band, Cry of Love, to his work with the Black Crowes, getting to play with Jimmy Page in that format, his work with the Dixie Chicks, and the last 7 years he's been with Sheryl Crow, all of the all-star bands he's been involved with, working with Don Was and all the Music Cares concerts that you can, see him on television. You've had an amazing career. We're just so happy to be able to sit down with you and tell some of your story.
I'm like I said, I'm really honored to
Awesome.
be here. I mean that.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about growing up in Burgaw, North Carolina.
Burgaw, North Carolina is the county seat of Pender County, North
Okay.
Carolina, which is one county away from New Hanover County, which is Cape Fear. It's the mouth of the Cape Fear River, and so the coast is right there. So I'm about 25 miles inland. And at the time when I was living there, about 2,000 people. It's very rural. And I didn't realize, when you're growing up, you don't think about it being rural. It's just your reality, and
just
we
is.
had a grocery store that I worked at and a post office and all that. So it didn't feel like a super small town to me at the time, although we got our first stoplight when I was 15 years old. So that kind of puts things into perspective. Now the interstate, I-40 goes through there, and that's been completed probably almost 30 years now. When I was growing up, there was no interstate, so
Yeah.
there was no chain restaurants or any of that. And that's where my mom's folks are from. And, quite honestly, it was a pretty great place to grow up, It's such a cliche now, but literally, riding your bike till dark in the summertime and playing basketball after dark in the driveway, and it was skateboarding, and I'm not going to say there weren't dreams of the bigger world out there, on a number of fronts, but I feel very fortunate to have grown up in a place like that. I look back now and think, what did people do? Because it's really agricultural there, and as we all know, those things are not what they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to grow a lot of tobacco down there, so it's like a bit of a double whammy. And there used to be, I think there was a couple of places, maybe there was a textile, like a hosiery mill, and maybe a couple of those or something like that. But other than that, it was, that was really, you had to commute into Wilmington, to work, I guess.
And that's where you started taking guitar lessons. But why did you want to take guitar lessons?
Well, it's weird, as with a lot of people that you speak with, there was just something inside of me from the time that I can remember. And my mom had gotten me a couple toy guitars, but for some reason when I would go to the department store, it was just something that there was just some kind of attraction, a pull. And you hear that from a lot of guys, it's really weird. And I had a friend named Andy Weibly, who's still a good buddy of mine, and I was close with his family, and he played guitar, and I just remember my dad was in the military, and we traveled around, and I remember encountering some kids that had played a little bit, and so one day I came home from school, and I was out in the driveway playing basketball, and my parents were like, "We signed you up for to take some guitar lessons at the same place that Andy takes his guitar lessons," and it was at a place called the Music Shop, aptly named, in Wilmington. And yeah, that's where I started. And I think I was about 11 years old, something like that.
Yeah. And so when did Ernie Johnson come into the picture, who was a guitar teacher to
Ernie,
you?
well, to give you a little context, I lived in Pender County. I think there were 2 or 3 other people in the county that I knew of that played guitar. Ernie lived in the next county over, and he was much more accomplished and much more knowledgeable than any of us. And he had a Les Paul Custom and an Ampeg V2 amp, which I wish I had right now.
It's a serious rig, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and had a band with his brother, and so this was. I think it probably. I think that I probably first heard of him through the church, because they played in church, and so I had been playing for a while at that point. I took lessons for 2 or 3 years, and the guy I had 3 or 4 different teachers because people would come and go at the store. You know, it was a very typical thing, and it was in a broom closet in the back of the music store, and the building is still there. It's been a restaurant bar for 35 years now at least, but it's still there on South College Road in Wilmington, North Carolina. But I had been playing for a few years. The guy, or the last teacher that I had, basically told my parents, hey, we've gone as far as we can go, so I got some building blocks, and then I just began to do the thing that is, these days is really antiquated, of pulling the needle back on the record,
Right.
And I taught myself a lot of things there. So my father was sick for the better part of 10 years, maybe over 10, and in varying degrees of sickness, and my mom took care of him. And so these sometimes some other folks would step in and spend time with me, and so Ernie was one of those people who was a very big mentor to me and taught me a lot about music, and turned me on to a lot of music, and he took up time with me playing and showing me things, and you have to realize he was 21 years old, I was 15. When I was in college, when I was 21, the last thing I wanted to spend my time doing was hanging around with a 15-year-old. I had been there and done that, so it made a big impression on me, musically and personally, and we had a lot of fun. I look forward to him coming around and us getting in his green Ford van and going to the music store, whatever it was we were going to do. It was something that was a real high point of those years of my life.
Yeah, he was investing in you, and
absolutely,
and teaching you. What were some of the things that you learned from him, either playing wise or
I learned a 7-sharp 9 chord, which I didn't know the name of, and he didn't either. But the Hendrix chord, the James Brown chord, right? I totally remember him showing me that. That's the first thing that pops into my head. But he was a guy that would be like, hey, you should listen to this Allman Brothers record, or here's this Mountain album you should check out, and he would let me borrow these things, and he had a 4-track recorder and a Roland Space Echo. I mean, it was big doings, as they say. And he and his brother had a music shack out by his house. He still lives on that property, I think, and we would go out there, and we would just jam, and he would like, I'll record you, and then I could have a cassette to ride around and go, wow, that's us playing, so just a lot of things of that nature. And I remember asking him one time, what is this mid-range knob? What is that, So, but above and beyond all that and all the sort of music mentoring, just a great guy, and his energy was just, really.
So then you went off to college, and you graduated with a history degree.
Sure did, yep.
And you were playing like in frat bands and things like that. And how do we get to Cry of Love?
Well, when I went to school, the first year of school, I lived at home in University of North Carolina in Wilmington, which is about 25 miles away. And then my dad passed, and then I began living in Wilmington, and met some people in town that were like in local bands and musicians and whatnot, so hanging around at the music store, as you do, And there was a club there called the Mad Monk that was owned by a guy named Charlie Maltzby. He built it and owned it, and he had just passed away a few weeks ago. But he did wonderful things for the community there as far as the community of musicians, because it gave us a place to go and see these regional sort of touring acts. And when I say touring, it's cover bands, basically, you know. And so that place kind of was the portal for me. I didn't realize, Zach, you know, I didn't realize these things at the time. I never really had any kind of plan or any kind of vision. It just was in incremental steps, and I thought, you know, if I could get in one of those club bands, as they call them, you know, I could get out on the road and start playing, and that sounds really fun, because I'll get to travel around and stand up on the stage and play some music, and somehow through that scene, I ended up meeting a lot of the people that came through there, and I ended up getting in one of those groups, you know. And I think it was probably like the last vestiges of a type of band that I'm not sure really exists anymore, where there was a circuit and a regional circuit, and you would go and play in these towns 3 nights a week or 6 nights a week, 4 sets a night, you know. And I think it probably goes back to, like, you know, and you basically are playing the hits of the day, or some segment of the hits of the day, you know. And I think it probably was just part of the continuum going back to the early 60s, 50s, you know, the same thing that the guys that were playing frats back then and playing Wooly Bully and whatnot, you know.
Certainly.
Drinking age changed, you know, some other factors happened. I'm not sure that world really exists anymore. I'm not sure you can go to a college town and the band from Missouri comes through every 2 months.
Right.
You know, but that used to be the lay of the land where I was from anyway, you know. So I didn't know anybody. That was the only way that I knew that you could play music and you know, try to make a living. But because when I was growing up, you know, there was nowhere to play. Nobody in my family played music. No, you know, it was just not an option, you know. And in those areas, you know, there were no opportunities to do much of anything. It's probably changed a little bit now. You know, you could put together a combo and play around the tourist areas down there, do just fine, have a nice life doing that, you know. But so that was the thing that got me out of there. So I ended up being in a couple of those groups, and after a couple of years of that, you know, as they say, it wasn't really all that it was cracked up to be in my mind, and I got really kind of tired of it and started to think, you know, how am I going to move this forward? This is, you know, am I just going to drive around to these same towns for the rest of my life and play 4 sets a night and not make any money? You know, and live with 5 guys in a hotel room. So I thought, you know, what if I just stop, go get a job, you know, we'll put a band together if I can, and rehearse at night, and, you know, try to learn how to do this for real. And so the bass player in the band that I was in at the time, Robert Kearns, who plays in the Sheryl group still, you know, I went to him and said, hey, you know, what do you think about this idea? And so that's what we did, and got a rehearsal space, and I got a job at a guitar store and taught guitar lessons and played at weddings on the weekend, and somehow managed to rehearse at night, and, you know, wrote, you know, I have no idea how many songs that we would play live that all got thrown in the trash. You know, it was just it was a very heady time, a lot of work, extreme focus, and so we did that for a few years, and ended up getting a record deal.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, on paper, it seemed like it happened pretty fast, but yeah.
No, we had our first rehearsal in the group, and I do believe memory serves me correct here, at the end of 1988, beginning of 1989, and we got our deal like in 92.
Okay.
So that was about 3 years, you know,
So
which
you put
these days is not doesn't seem that long, but
Yeah.
But then, yeah, there was a lot of hours, man. Yeah.
So you get signed, and then of course you're put, with a producer. So how much of a shock was it to be, really recording, an album on a major label?
Well, it wasn't a shock at all because the guy that did our record, John Custer, was a guy that had done our demos.
Okay.
And he was a friend of ours and
Yeah.
took a real interest in the band and was very invested in it also.
Yeah.
So when we went down to Muscle Shoals in '92 and made that record, and so it wasn't, we just kind of, man, we had rehearsed so much.
Yeah.
We didn't gig that much. We didn't do any like, let's get out and do some regional tourings. We all had jobs and, but we had rehearsed so much that we just went in and set up and just played our show.
Which studio in Muscle Shoals?
It was the one down by the river that's not there anymore.
Okay.
The second location of Muscle Shoals Sound,
Okay,
right?
right.
The really big one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were there at the same time that Widespread Panic was making, not Space Wrangler, I can't remember, but Johnny Sandlin was producing them in the other room.
Yeah.
So it was a very heady thing
Yeah.
for us because, I can speak for me personally, I was still had at least one leg in a turnip truck at that point, And we met Jimmy and we met David and Roger.
Yeah.
And
The Swampers.
it was a life-changing experience for me as far as not only getting to make the record, but as far as like listening habits, getting exposed to some things and going, you know what, I really need to go back and check this, spend more time checking these records out and
Yeah.
whatnot.
So in listening habits, you're talking about listening to some of the other records.
So, talking about listening, expanding my listening habits to include, records that had been cut down there that I wasn't aware of, which then opened doors to if you like this thing, then you're really going to like this thing,
Right. Once you start going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I'm still, as I'm sure you are, I'm still down it today,
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful experience, yeah.
So then you start having some success with the band, and you're kind of opening, for some major acts. And
Yeah, we did real well at radio. We had a couple of songs, at least two, I think, that were #1 records on what used to be an album-oriented rock chart. I think now it's probably called Active Rock or something like that. But yeah, we did. Somehow they ran that up the flagpole, and it was real fun to be driving in a van and at midnight leaving a gig somewhere headed to the next one, and your song comes on the radio in the middle of Iowa somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that was not a thrill. Yeah, and we did. We went out and we did a couple of tours with Robert Plant. Interestingly enough, we did some shows last year with Sheryl with Robert Plant. So all this time later,
yeah,
I
guess his style of music has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, he's got those guys are. It's pretty incredible, this group that he has right now. Good, nice guys too. It was a great experience. So yeah, we did some shows with Aerosmith and with ZZ Top and festivals. We did a thing with Paul Rogers. That was the first thing. We might have done that before our record came out, I think. And it was a lot. It was a whole lot coming hard and fast,
What were some of your best, kind of favorite memories from that time period in the band?
Well, making that record, probably, to be honest with you, out of the whole experience. It's funny, I'm sure that people tell you this, but some people say, that the getting there part is the thing when you look back that seems the best part. You can't tell young people that.
Yeah, because you had that whole natural progression of a band that starts out, rehearsing in a garage or a practice room somewhere, and then you're signed, you're cutting a record in Muscle Shoals, you're getting to open for these major bands and guitar players that are heroes of yours.
Yeah. So, making the record, well, just what you just said, getting to do that, play these. Playing at Nassau Coliseum with Leonard Skinner and Driving and Crying, you know what I mean? And things that you would just never.
Yeah. What were some things that you learned during that process that were kind of, like, oh my goodness, moments or things that really changed maybe your playing or your attitude toward music?
it was head down,
Yeah.
drive that van,
Okay.
get it done.
Yeah.
Didn't really have time
Yeah.
for that.
Okay.
You know, it's
Well,
a lot.
just-
It's
yeah.
a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know, people don't realize.
Yeah. People don't realize when you're at that point of touring,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's just a whole lot of work, because it's not like you have, you know, you're able to have a bunch of roadies and merch guys and guys driving you know, the bus for you. There's
No,
a lot,
well,
there's a
and
lot
we
of
did.
work
We did
involved.
have a 2-man
Yeah.
crew that drove a box truck, and we drove our van around. But you know, there's a lot of radio, morning shows, radio,
Right.
this and that, blah blah
Yeah.
blah, so and so, you know, and so, and a lot of driving.
As with, you know, most bands, they have kind of a life cycle, and you know, the band kind of came to an end, and then it didn't seem like it was long before you were with the Black Crows.
No, it didn't take too long. You know, it was. I put 9 years of my life into that group, into the Cry of Love band. I think 9, maybe more. Certainly more if you go back to when you first conceptualizing it. You know.
Yeah.
And it just kind of ran its course. So we played our last show, like in August, I think, if memory serves, like the end of summer of '97. And I got back home, and a friend of mine came up and said, "Hey, you know, these Black Crows guys are trying to get in touch with you." I was like, "What do you mean they're trying to get in touch with me?" You know,
Yeah.
I guess a couple of other guys that had been in some other groups around had recommended me to fill this spot that they had, a lead guitar spot, and they were on the same label that Cry of Love was on, and the A&R guy there, Josh Sarban, that had been very instrumental in our, and you know, he probably believed in our band more than we did, was still there. So there were a few angles where there were people that knew me, that knew them, that were able to communicate to them, hey, this might be a guy you want to, you know, check out or whatnot. So I went down to audition, and I think that was in the fall of '97. Yeah, it was probably barely 6 weeks after
The last show.
after our last show. And I had been aware that there was a chair there, you know, that it was open, so to speak,
Right.
before the band was done. And but I didn't really see any. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen, to try to, you know, if this is something that I would like to try to pursue. I've been a really big fan of their band, you know. So I went down and auditioned, and I got a call. That was on a Friday. Drove down there and drove back 8 hours.
That was down in Atlanta?
That was in Atlanta. I was in Raleigh in my 1990 Nissan truck with my amp head and my guitar, you know. And came back. That was on a Friday. I got a call back on a Monday. And then nothing for like 8 months.
Oh,
Nothing
wow.
happened. And I thought, well, you know, I did as good a job as I could do.
Yeah.
And then what had happened was they were making a record in New
Okay.
York. And they went ahead and made the record. And then when it came time for them to start thinking about touring that, they needed somebody to fill the position. So I guess it came back on the radar like around May, you know, so that was August till then, or October till then, or whatever. This is all, I think this is a correct timeline. And I got called, hey, learn these songs, it's like 30 songs, you know, come down and play. And I said, well, now, are you offering me the job, you know, whatnot? Well, everybody hadn't heard you yet, because when I auditioned, you know, Chris, the singer, was not there, and the keyboard player wasn't there. There was a new bass player. And so I went down to Atlanta and, you know, and went in and played. And after, you know, the first day, they offered me the gig. So that's how all that happened. So basically, that's a long way of me saying I auditioned for the gig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then didn't get a response for months. And
Yeah,
then finally, And then finally you had the gig.
Yeah.
So in Cry of Love, you know, you were there when the band was born. You helped birth it. You were, you know, doing all this hard work. Now you're joining a band that's already established. That's already, you know, you're not you're not part of the leadership of this. You're a sideman, and all of a sudden you're thrust into a whole nother level of touring. I mean, what was that kind of a jarring experience?
It was completely overwhelming, and I didn't know it at the time because you're just living minute to minute, and as they say, doing the best you know how to do,
Right.
at the time. But it was completely overwhelming.
What was overwhelming about it?
Well, just all those things that you mentioned. First off, how do I have to learn now to be the at the bottom of the totem pole?
Right.
As far as importance.
Yeah.
And nothing, the quality of my work doesn't really matter as far as that goes, because I'm the new guy, and and so you're not going to really have a say so, and as it should be, they've put heart and soul into this thing for years and years and made something happen, and they don't need an interloper coming in saying, "Hey fellas, I think you should do such and such," So that was an adjustment. But I think that I kind of understood that fairly well because I certainly didn't come in and try to alpha the situation. I was
Right.
I kind of figured out fairly quickly. Okay, this is my place in this and whatnot. Yeah, it was a very intense group of guys, and the music reflects that
Yeah.
in the best possible way. And
Yeah.
so it was it was just a very heady experience, and there was a whole. I remember walking into the rehearsal space the first day and just the square footage. With my band, Cry of Love, we literally rehearsed in a tiny. There's pictures of it on inside our record, with probably a 7-foot ceiling. Floor was slanted. I don't even know how. It was not nearly as big as the room that we're sitting in right now.
Right.
So that's just one example, of just walking in and going, wow, there's a refrigerator in here.
Right.
And
And there's nice catering.
so it was just like that's just one minute piece of it, but I think that kind of, would be an example that kind of explains if you're not used to that, then there's a whole lot of other things that you're not going to be used to. So all the way from just the size of the rehearsal space, to the fact that there were just it was just a different reality than on a lot of levels. The nice hotels and everything.
Yeah. So then eventually, Jimmy Page, gets in touch with the group, and you basically, kind of back up Jimmy Page, and you're doing Led Zeppelin tunes, and that was I know that y'all recorded some of the Black Crowes tunes also, but the only ones that were really released on that Live from the Greek album were the Zeppelin tunes and kind of some older covers. So, my goodness, I mean, what was it? What was it like to get to play with Jimmy Page?
Man, it was as surreal for somebody coming from where I come from,
Yeah.
as it possibly could be. I mean, I had literally the Circus Magazine '77 tour, with the yellow sunglasses and the SS hat and the double neck white dragon suit poster, double fold out poster on my wall, and
I mean, Jimmy Page kind of wrote the book on on the way you presented yourself, and how you had a Les Paul and you had it low, and the way he dressed and everything else. He was kind of an archetype for rock guitar players.
I learned so much, just things like, being able to put two and two together. If you hear the solo that Eric Clapton played in Crossroads, which was famous it was before my time, but it was famous when I was a kid as something that you need to check that out.
Yeah.
And you hear the solo that Jimmy Page plays in Black Dog, your brain, when you're putting these things together as a kid and sort of learning how to make sentences out of words, I'm like, oh, they both started in that major scale and then went and played the minor scale.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Page, he's one of the architects of the whole idea of like rock and roll guitar playing,
Yeah.
you know, and so all those things, we could go on and on and
Yeah.
on about how big a shadow he cast.
Right.
You know.
Well, what were some kind of like, oh my goodness moments, like when, you know, like maybe the way he played something, or maybe, you know, like the way he dialed up a sound or things like that.
Man, I remember specifically one time, I think it was at the Greek, we were playing Lemon Song. And you know, it was loud up there. I was using a 250 watt amps, you know, and Jimmy had, I think, 100 watt. I can't remember, maybe like a Sovtech or something weird like that. Or no, he was using maybe a Fender Tone Master, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember totally, we're playing Lemon Song, we're in the middle of this jam, and just hearing that, you know, because sometimes it was hard for me to hear him because I had bass on my side and I'm over here and he's on the other side of the drums. Really loud, but you know, I just remember specifically at that moment, you know, it was probably a down dynamic thing and him playing, and you know, it's just a head whipper. You know, you're just like, there's that sound right there. It's manifesting itself right now, you know, and it was incredible.
Yeah.
To hear that, you know.
So was it interesting, you know, kind of having to learn these parts and play them with Jimmy?
Yeah, it was an incredible experience because, you know, and I'm sure that you know this too. You know, you think you know how songs go.
Right.
You've sat down and learned them. Then years later, you go back and go, boy, I did not have this right at all. So it was very valuable as far as that goes. And like I said, I didn't want to show up and look like a chump. You know, the band didn't want to show. Everybody in the band did their homework. So we show up, we're rehearsing. We're doing the song 10 Years Gone, epic Zeppelin song on Physical Graffiti. And there's 5 guitars in one section in the middle of the song where there's a harmony. And now, ironically enough, it's all, there's a bootleg that it might even be on YouTube, but I know that somebody had given me a copy of it, of him working that very section out at home on his 4 whatever reel-to-reel he has, and it's all very clear. You know, at the time, I could have saved myself 4 days worth of work trying to pour through and hear these things at the time. And so I figured out what I thought was the correct parts that we would be playing. And through listening to these bootlegs, you know, I was able to go, you know, before he gets here, I think what he's going to want to play is this, and you know, if you'll play this and I can play this and whatnot.
Because that's one of the issues that you really have to kind of, you know, pain over, is you have to be thinking about when you've got multiple guitar parts, okay, what part is he going to want to play?
Right, and the you know, the key, the thing that unlocks that is if you can find some live versions.
Right.
I wish there aren't very many of that, you know.
Yeah.
But I think I did, and so when he showed up, we kind of had that together, you know. But then the harmony part came up, and he comes up to me, and we're at the Montana rehearsal space in New York, and he was like, "Now, what is the other part in the harmony on 10 Years Gone? Can you show that to me?" And so I'm like, I think this is what it is. So I showed him the 2 parts. He goes, "Well, let's play that together." And we played it together, and I think that's pretty much what was on the record. And I said, "Does that sound right, Jimmy?" And he goes, "Well, it sounds good." And he just turned around and walked off. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
you know.
Were there any kind of humorous moments with Jimmy, just because of kind of who he is, and you were, you know, working with him, and just, you know, kind of the strangeness of touring with kind of a rock god?
Hey, man, you know, I don't think I've even processed it still. You know, it's just it was just so far away from from where I came from. And really, if I would have lived my whole life in New York, it would have been so far away from where I came from that,
Yeah.
you know, to be really honest with you, I don't think that I have still, that I can still even now really sort of understand, you know.
Right.
I didn't meet the guy at a party. I mean, we played music together,
Yeah.
you know, and yeah, he was great. I'll tell you that. Very respectful and never was dour with the band, you know,
Yeah.
and
Took everything seriously and was
Yeah.
on.
yeah, and he was fun. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? It wasn't he didn't lord any. It was not a fear-based
Yeah.
thing, you know.
Yeah.
The experience, except for my own, you know, like being terrified that there's Jimmy Page, you know.
Eventually, the Black Crowes were a little bit of a volatile band, and they kind of called it quits again. And then you moved on to some other bands, and you started playing with everyone from Peter Frampton to Joe Perry, and you know, all sorts of, you know, sessions and such. Well, what was the next tour that you were on after the Black Crowes?
Oh, so Crows, that was 2001. I don't know. There's been so many things. I think I did in 2002 maybe this Blue Floyd thing, which was like a collective that went out and we did Pink Floyd songs, but that was with Johnny Neal, you know Johnny, and
Yeah.
and Matt Apps from Government Mule playing drums, and Barry Oakley Jr. was playing the bass, and some other folks. Jeff Pevar played guitar, and my friend Alvin Youngblood Hart played guitar, and Shane Theriot, he's a good buddy of mine. We all kind of did. I think that happened in 2002, so that would have been the very next
Okay.
thing.
So you decided to move to Nashville partially because of that housing was affordable and you were getting kind of a good vibe from it.
Yeah, and yeah, the people, like I said, you know,
Yeah.
and the fact that there was a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people that play music here, and this
Yeah.
was, you know, years back. I mean, there's a lot more now, but even
Right.
then, there was a lot more than other places that I had been, you know. And I never had any designs on coming here because, quite frankly, wasn't a fan of like the contemporary popular music that was being made here. You know,
Right.
just wasn't my bag, man. You know,
Right.
and so I hadn't really considered this as a destination, but
Yeah.
but I sure am glad that I did it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. How did you end up playing with Joe Perry?
Man, that goes back to us playing a few shows with Aerosmith.
Okay.
The Cry of Love, playing some shows with Aerosmith. Then we played some with the Crows. We played some shows with Aerosmith in Europe, festivals and some opening dates, best I can remember. And so it kind of came out of that. You know,
Yeah.
he had made a record and needed to put a band together to go out and play a little bit and to do some TV promo and whatnot.
Yeah. And Peter Frampton?
Frampton came from, well, the bass player. I was in this band for a minute that we just were like an R&B cover band called Peaceful Knievel of all things, and it was me and Mike Ferris. I don't know if you know Mike,
Yeah.
the singer, and a wonderful, wonderful keyboard player named George Lax that has been in Lenny Kravitz's band for 25 years, and my good friend Andy Hess playing bass, who played with me in the Crows, and Charlie Drayton on the drums.
Heavy.
And so I got Charlie on the Joe Perry thing to play bass. And then Charlie recommended me to one of the guys in the Frampton band that was friends of his, and he was saying, hey, we need a guitar player. And so he recommended me, and I just went and auditioned over at Soundcheck down the street here. You know?
Yeah.
So that's how that happened.
And the Dixie Chicks, where you were playing with David Grissom.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. The band was fantastic, and the keyboard player was Larry Nechtel. I don't know if you know who he is, but
played with Brett and part of the Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, and talk about make your eyes crossed.
Yeah.
You know, the list goes on and on. I mean, you know, piano on Bridge Over Troubled Water. He arranged that.
Yeah.
You know, played bass on Mr. Tambourine Man. You know, he had endless stories. Sweet guy too, very real guy. You know, he was not a jive person at all. And you know, to be around that and to be able to hear those stories and to be around musicians of that caliber. Keith Sewell playing acoustic guitar, unbelievable, playing mandolin, you know, just incredible high level operating folks, you know. And the drummer was first time I ever played with Fred Eltringham, who's in the Sheryl band now, and we've done a lot of playing together through the years. So it was a good year, you know, to be you know, make friends with those guys and to get to listen to David play guitar and to listen to Keith play guitar.
Yeah. So you've had a lot of situations where you've been in bands with multiple guitar players. Mm-hmm. So how did you know, you've learned how to do that, but how could you tell the rest of us what are ways in which you can kind of play well with others when you have another guitar player in the band or multiple guitar players?
Well, you know, I don't have any real hard and fast answers to that. I mean, everything's situationally based, you know, and
yeah,
you figure it out. But I would say that if there is two things. Number one, if you can just listen, if you can. Sometimes it's really hard to do that when you're doing a live situation. You know, it's really hard to literally, physically hear what the other guitar player's doing. I mean, you know, in the Allman Brothers, they set up next to each other,
yeah,
so they can hear each other, and
right,
and so they're able to play appropriately, you know. But I would say, you know, if you listen, if it's possible. And the second thing is err on the side of playing less, you know, and also think about the idea of playing to your strengths, not just for you, but for the other person, you know. If they do things that are more in their wheelhouse, as they say these days, you know, don't be, you know, it's going to make the music better if they do it.
Right.
You know.
Do you ever think about tone-wise, like how do I differentiate myself tonally from the other? Mm-hmm. So what would you do? Man,
you know, luckily I kind of have a, you know, I would say anyway, a little bit of a cleaner sound than a lot of guys do, and so sometimes just by default, it kind of just fits in because I don't have for most of the gig, I don't really try to have a lot of gain happening, okay, you know. But there's a lot of things to think about there, you know. And it's situationally based. Once again, you know, if you're playing in a group like the Allman Brothers or whatnot, it might not be that important, you know, because you've got two guys with humbucking guitars and Marshalls. Right. It's all about pickup selection and style, really.
Yeah, there is variation between the two, but really their tones are somewhat similar.
Right. If you're in another situation, it's a good idea to at least think about that, you know.
Yeah.
I'd say it's song by song basis, you know.
Now, how did you get involved with Sheryl Crow?
Man, Peter Stroud, who was her band leader and a longtime guitar player, was a friend of mine. In fact, he was the guy that recommended me to Ken to do the first session that I ever did out here, because he had worked on this record also. And we had just remained friends through the years. Did a recording project back in like 2009 or 10 called Big Hat that Robert and Fred from the Sheryl band and a lot of other folks, Robert from Cry of Love obviously, had been in. We made an EP, and she just needed she had done a record and done an R&B tour with Doyle and a different band, and so they were getting ready to get up and running, and she needed a new set of folks, and so Peter said, I think you should at least listen to these guys. Yeah. So he's responsible for that. Yeah, I owe that to him for sure. Yeah.
And you've been with her for 7 years.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Yeah. I think 2012 maybe we started there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good gig. You know, it comes from the top down as far as that goes. Good. She's phenomenal.
It's always good to hear that.
Yeah. Is it not? Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So also, I've noticed you being in a lot of television bands, you know, when they've been, you know, and a lot of the times it's with Don Was as kind of the musical director. So how did you get involved in all these kind of, you know, television shows where you've been part of the, you know, backup band?
Man, I can point that to Warren Haynes, of all things. I've known Warren for a really long time, and have done quite a bit of work with Government Mule, and you know, used to be able to go out, sit in with the Almonds and things, you know, because of him. He's a North Carolina guy too.
Yeah.
In 2010, I think it was, they were doing a Greg Allman thing. Obviously, Greg was still with us at that point at the Fox in Atlanta, and I remember I was at the YMCA over on Gallatin Road here, and got back in my car, and the phone lit up, and it was like, "Hey, are you interested?" It was somebody at some office I had never know who any of these people were. Are you interested in being in this house band for this Greg Allman tribute thing? You know, and I was like, "I absolutely am. I'm interested in that."
Absolutely.
And so at the rehearsals, someone, it might be the guy that promotes a lot of these shows, said, "Yeah, Warren recommended you to do this thing." Well, now Don had produced Black Crowes record called Lions.
Okay.
That I only played on a couple of songs on that, so I was only in the studio for a couple of days, but he was there.
Yeah.
And I guess he remembered me from that. If you would have asked me if he'd remembered who I was, I would have been like, he has no idea. I mean, the guy plays a lot of music, does a lot of records.
Yes, he does.
But I guess, so maybe Warren told him, and Don was like, "Oh, I know that guy, yeah, let's give that a shot." And so I did that one, and it's, you know, get hired to do these things, you know. So those have been really wonderful and have led to a lot of not just great musical moments, but some real special moments for me, because I've gotten to participate in some things to honor some folks that are really like meaningful. It's not just a gig, you know what I mean? Even the Greg thing, you know, I mean, I grew up with that. It loomed really large. You know, I got the Brothers and Sisters record when I was in 6th grade for Christmas.
And the people that came out for that, you know, you had Taj Mahal and Jackson Brown and Vince Gill and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And and then some of these other, you know, kind of where you've been part of these house bands. So who are some of the acts that you got to play with that were really special moments for you?
Well, the Dylan Musicares thing was pretty heady. You know, that's the night he gave that crazy speech.
Right, that's been transcribed and you can find online.
I was standing out watching him say that, you know, and the Ringo Starr's out in the audience, and, you know, among God knows who else. But that was an incredible one. Springsteen was on that. Tom Jones was on that, you know. I don't know, I'd have to really sit here and think, but the ones that immediately spring to mind, we did a Skinnered one at the Fox in Atlanta. And that music really loomed large for me when I was a kid in rural North Carolina in 1977, believe me, if you played guitar, you know. And I had a copy of their live record, One More From the Road, that was recorded at the Fox Theater in Atlanta. And you would see the T-shirts that say "Live at the Fox," you know, that Ronnie Van Zant's wearing. So that was a big thing for me when I was in high school, that record. I learned to play a lot of guitar off that album, you know. So here we are, 30 years later, however many, at the Fox, and I got to stand on stage and tell Gary Rossington, "Hey, I used to cut grass to make my money to go to Best Products, and in the summer of '77 or whenever it was, I went down and bought that record, and I had a copy of it, and he signed it, and my original copy, and he signed it for me," you know. These things are personal, you know, to other people. They're like, "Yeah, whatever," you know.
No, those are special moments.
But it was I was standing on the stage in that building, you know, and I'd stared at that album cover for hundreds of hours, you know, and learning, and that was an incredible thing to be able to do that. And I think that he heard me. I think he actually heard me and was like, "Oh yeah, this is guys, you know, for real here." And to, you know, then they're standing on the side of the stage while you're playing their parts. You know,
it's a very, you know, momentous opportunity.
Well, and you think about it, it's so humbling, and I mean that. I really do mean that, a love of music and, this guitar brought me to that place.
Yeah.
It's a powerful, very, very powerful thing.
Yeah. I guess the most recent one has been the Elvis one. That was.
Yeah, we actually did one. We did one, a Willie Nelson thing.
Okay.
But that actually happened before the Elvis thing was on TV. We taped the Elvis thing last year.
Okay.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I taped it over a couple of days out in California. Yeah, that was really something special, to say the least.
Thinking about all the people that have kind of poured into you, like Ernie, and getting all these playing situations, what are some important bits of wisdom that you wish that maybe you had been told, or ones that you would just want to pass on to others?
There's a lot of miles, and there's been a lot of years and a lot of experience. So there's a lot of things. But also you got to be careful to not be preachy. I can't say that there's anything that I wish somebody would have told me, because I just had to figure it out for myself, and I never have really had too much of a plan. I mean, my plan was, if I can get in one of these cover bands, I'll do that. I didn't really think that I was going to ever be good enough to do, on my instrument to do that. That kind of happened. Planned to quit doing that, and let's just see if we can put a band together and figure out how to make some of our own songs and see if we can get a record deal, And so I kind of planned that. After that, it just kind of, things have just kind of happened.
Yeah.
All that to say, I would say this. If you have a passion for something, and in our case we're talking about playing the guitar, if you have an idea and you're beginning your journey, and I guess you're speaking about guys that are maybe on the on-ramp.
Yeah.
Usually at that time in your life, maybe you have a little less responsibility and things are maybe not as complicated, And if that's the case, I'd say pursue the thing that you really think that you want to do. So you're 25, 30 years later, you don't look back and say, man, I wish I would have done that.
Yeah.
Because if you are at a time now, don't get me wrong, if you are at a time in your life where you have the freedom to do that, I would say maybe that's the most important thing, because there's always time later to maybe take a step back and go, this is not working. Maybe I should think about some other options. But you got to give it a shot.
Yeah.
It's not always going to be easy.
Yeah. Because you have to put in the hard work. Just like you did when you were going to play with Paige, you didn't just show up. You did
well, that's a whole other set of advice, whatever.
But that's always part of it.
Absolutely.
Always putting in the hard work.
Yeah, there's no substitute for that. There's no substitute. And also then you can look back 30 years later and go, hey, I didn't blow it. I worked hard. I did what I needed to do. I over-prepared.
Right.
I showed up 5 minutes ahead of time.
Yes.
That kind of stuff. But I would say, outside of all that sort of those kinds of career components or whatnot, if you really think you want to do something and you're in a position to be able to do it, give it a shot.
Well, Audley, let's talk a little gear. So first off, tell me about this original Senn guitar that you have.
Well, Jeff. You've spoken to Jeff. Everybody knows Jeff. Man, I don't know. He built the guitar, and yeah, it's just one of his creations, And I can't, to be honest with you, I think there's a Don Mayer pickup. Okay. And this might be a Lawler. I can't really remember. It just agrees with me. I had another one of his guitars that was the exact same setup, with a rosewood board and same color and everything, and it just didn't resonate with me as much. And he built another one. He was like, man, I think you might want to check this other one out, And I just love it. It plays really great, and it's a good sound. It's very versatile. as far as being a good rock and roll guitar, but it's a good R&B guitar also. You know, I got another one. I got a '54 reissue of Fender. I think it's a '54, the Blackguard ones. Is that what those? It's a '50s, American '50s reissue that I've had for like 20 years. I got it from a Fender guy in '99 when we were playing with Jimmy Page at the Roseland for $450. But I was able to go through all the ones he had there, and it was the best sounding one. It sounded better than any of the custom shop ones. And it's a really like rock and roll sounding guitar. It does sound like the Rolling Stones, you know. And it's out with the Sheryl gear right now. But those are my two main Telecasters, which I kind of consider a really good do-all guitar in a lot of ways, you know.
Yeah. And while you've got this guitar, you've got a little pedal board over here. It's got a smattering of effects on there, and then I'll do a blatant plug. He's got a one spot powering
Don't leave home without it, yeah.
Yes. And so, of the effects on here, tell us a little bit about the ones that you use the most on there.
Man, you know, it really depends on the gig. I don't want to evade the situation, but
so you swap stuff out?
I swap stuff out on it all the time, and like, you know, on some of these tribute gigs, you know, house band things, depending on what the body of work that we're trying to interpret is, you know, like sometimes, you know, you need different things than other things, but the basic food groups for me, you know, are a couple of levels of boost or distortion and some tremolo and you know, sometimes I use a delay. I don't really use it that much. And then sometimes some kind of swirly box, you know what I mean, a phaser or a univibe or a Leslie sound.
Right.
If the gig doesn't require any more than that, I'm pretty good to go. Maybe a fuzz box of some kind, you know, sometimes.
Yeah. But on the Sheryl gig, like what kind of effects do you?
I don't really use too much, man. You know, I've got a couple of overdrives. I've got a thing called a Reveal that my tech, Andy, they have a company called Grindstone, I think it's called, and it's a really transparent, like boost, clean boost, one knob, clean boost thing. And I got the El Capistan Strymon that I use for some slapback or a long delay, but that's really only a couple of songs a night. And a little tremolo, and I got an Archer that I really like for solos, and then I swap out the Archer is like the normal gain solo thing, but if I really want to get like a super, a little more sustain and whatnot, I swap that. I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah.
You know?
What kind of amp do you use on the Sheryl gig?
Right now, man, I'm using the Blackface Deluxe for Fender sound, if that makes any sense, which I use for 2 or 3 songs a night. And usually the other amp, well, always is a Vox flavored thing. And right now I'm using a Bad Cat 30. I have used the Extra Chimey, the Third Power Woolly Coats Extra Chimey, which sounds really, really great too.
And that's kind of a Princeton-sized amp, but it's got
Princeton-sized amps,
EL84s
but
in
it's
it.
an EL84 thing. It's really grab and go friendly. It sounds really, really good. And I've used Matchless Lightning. But I just got this Bad Cat, and I'm just giving it a spin, and it sounds real good, you know. Any
speaker favorites? What kind of speakers do you like to use?
Well, you know, yet again, it depends on the amp. You know, of the Celestians, I really like the G12H more than the vintage 30s or the 25s. I don't know, they just agree with my ear more. Yeah. But I've come to really like the gold for that flavor, for the Alnico flavor. And of course the blues sound amazing, you know, in a Vox style amp, but you just got to be so careful with them, not blowing them up, you know. Yeah. I'm not really an aficionado of all that stuff so much, you know, but I think I sort of know what I like, but I kind of, you know, shoot now and ask questions later, just, you know, as far as that goes.
You've got a Lazy J amp?
Yeah, this guy Jesse Hoff over in England makes these, and I got turned on to him by a guitar player in London named Luke Potashnik. Jesse is from, well, he lived for a while in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and this amp actually was in Myrtle Beach. A friend of his had it, and I bought this from him. And it's like a Tweed Deluxe of some description. You know, he's monkeyed with it somehow. I don't really know how, but that one's got an Alnico Blue in it, and this amp I will say sounds the best through that speaker. Okay. I use it in the studio sometimes, you know, as a head through other speakers, and it sounds really, really good. But it really speaks through that thing. So it's a fun amp. I mean, my go-to, I have a Germino 50-watt Germino amp that's a great rock and roll. It's like a JTM 45. You know, that's a good do-all. I would say that the feel that I like the most probably comes from British amps more than from I'm not really a fully devoted to like blackface Fenders and things, but this JTM 45 thing sounds really good, and I'm just a big fan of the AC30 style circuit, and luckily, you know, in the Sheryl band that really works well, I think, you know, with her songs. You know.
Do you have to, you know, certain bands have different, you know, kind of volume ceilings and such. Do y'all have to kind of keep the volume down lower with her, or is it?
They're pretty much all the ceilings are pretty low these days. You know, like we were talking about, and, you know, and it's a product of a lot of different things. But yeah, we keep the volume down pretty much. I mean, I've got that 30. It's, you know, I got it up just enough to get a little hair on it and to get a little low end out of it. But it's pretty low, you know, and controllable. You know, the thing about volume on stage, I've got a lot of friends, you know, that grew up playing loud, like, you know, playing 150 watt, you know, 50 watt and 100 watt Marshalls in clubs. You know, that's just used to be the thing that people used to do. Some people are really good at doing that, so you can go to the club and watch them and you think that this is no louder than any other show because they play so dynamically and they mix themselves and the tones are not harsh or whatnot. But if you don't know what you're doing with something like that, it can be a pretty gnarly, you know.
Yeah, take your head off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let us hear a little bit of this guitar with the Lazy J. Wow. And that's the neck pickup.
That's neck pickup, yeah.
Nice, going from the you know, pedal steelish bend, you know, bending the wound D string, and then kind of some Keith Richards-y kind of, you know.
Yeah, you know, these guitars do a lot of things, man.
They do.
You know, they do a lot of things.
So tell us about this Senn guitar.
Man, this one was a gift from my wife, and she and Jeff sneakily put this together for me for a birthday a few years back, and she asked Jeff to build a guitar, which they subsequently sent to Gene Parsons and had a Parsons White bender put in it. And so it's really special to me on a couple of levels. Jeff just put some new frets in it and whatnot, but I've played this guitar a lot and recorded with it a lot, and it's fun to goof around with that bender, man. It's a really fun, and it's a really good sounding guitar otherwise too. You know, this maple fingerboard. It's a little more rock and roll.
Yeah, so, the clear plate on the back is neat to be able to see the mechanism in there.
He signed it too. You know, you can call Gene Parsons on the phone. It's so weird, you know. I had never talked to him, my wife, but they had it done, and it's the long throw, you know. So
okay, so basically it takes longer to get the whole step bent.
Right. So I mean, it's, you know, for lack of a better way to put it, it's just sort of more redneck sounding to me. You know what I mean? Getting that long twang thing happening.
More like Clarence. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got this guitar few years back, and it's just a late '64 or '65. You could probably tell me from the serial number. I don't know from the serial number, but the reason I know that is because it doesn't have this super skinny nut.
Right, which kind of was mid '65 or something.
That's
like
what
that.
I've heard. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, and it's all stock except for this tailpiece,
Which allows you to actually to be
semi in tune. Yeah, semi in tune. And you know, as I was saying earlier about the Vox style amp, my favorite pickup probably is a P90. I really like to lean on those because they're so versatile. You know, yet again, you know, you can roll that volume back just a little bit and spank these power chords. You know, or not power chords, but cowboy chords. You know, and it's just real clear and articulate. Townsendy, you know, sort of like the, I don't know, it's like those Big Star records or something. You know, I think that Chris Bell used a 330 on those records. But yet again, you know, you can go neck pickup and get a little go box going and get into a little bit of British blues territory or Duane Allman territory or whatnot. You know, with the right amp or pedal, or you can pick back here and get it almost twangy telly type sound. So this guitar, the neck, I don't know. I went in Guitar Center and was going to buy an amp. In fact, bought an amp and tried it out with this guitar, and took the amp back and bought the guitar. And Jeff Senn put some frets in it for me, a little bigger fret. I like a little bit bigger fret, you know. And the neck shape, I don't know. It's just something that I kind of fell in love with. There's been so many times in the past, I'm sure that everybody experiences this, where I've walked in, played something, and thought, man, that guitar is awesome. I really can't afford it, and just walked away from it. And this time I didn't. I actually bought the guitar. You know, so. The tuners are new. I said, I don't know. It's, you know.
Yeah. Plug that in. Let us hear it a little bit.
You know, it's really good for that kind of stuff, I think, you know, and then you can roll it up here and get a little bit of a thing.
Okay, I'm going to stop you for a minute. It's not common for rock players to use their fingers along with the pick. Where did you learn that technique from?
Man, you know where that came from? Yet again, subconsciously, I used to teach guitar lessons. Mm-hmm. And from sitting in a room, like when a student wouldn't show up, or just waiting for a student or whatnot, it just happened. I had no designs on that, or to the point now to where it's really hard for me to play a lot of things that I used to play just with a pick.
Right.
Yeah, you know, and I have to be careful because you don't want everything to sound like you're chicken picking and stuff, you know. Right. So maybe you angle your hand back and maybe a little more flesh or a little different sound or this or that. But yeah, but I've been doing that a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's great. You do have to be careful about getting into the chicken picking.
You don't want everything to pop, but you know, you kind of learn over the years,
Yeah.
Contextually speaking, you know.
Yeah, how to use that in a non-country
sort of
fashion.
Yeah. Try to anyway. Yeah.
What are some playing concepts that have really kind of opened your eyes?
I guess it really depends on yet again, you know, what kind of music that you're working with. You know, I really just love playing down Malcolm Young, just open chords, you know, same things you learn when you first learn how to play guitar, but it's all, you know, contingent upon a lot of this, how hard you're hitting things and voicings and whatnot. So I really like to hear that, you know, open strings sound.
Do you use capo, you know, when you on an electric, when you have to some odd keys or something?
Yeah. That's de-rigger, you know what I mean, especially with the number charts and whatnot. So capo. I don't know, Zach. I have a hard time. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
I don't really intellectualize it too much, but I like syncopated lead playing. You know, like if that makes any sense. Like think I discovered a few years back. I was watching, somebody sent me a video of Richie Blackmore playing on this beat club at this rehearsal take for a Deep Purple song, and I was watching him and I was like, oh, I must have got more from that guy than I realized I did, because he played a really funky and really clean 200-watt Marshall Strat, like unforgiving, dry, you know, and he plays some really funky stuff. I've always really liked that kind of playing, you know.
Yeah.
Not too far removed even from like what Steve Gaines played, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, people wouldn't put those things together, but
Yeah.
I think they probably were both listening to James Burton, you know, whoever, you know.
Yeah, I think there is a James Burton connection with he and Page and there was a British country player named Ray Flack
Yeah,
that
I've
was
heard
very
him, yeah.
influenced by Blackmore.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to say he's the blueprint, but
Yeah.
I do like that kind of playing. I used to go see a guy named Moses Moe that played this band called Mother's Finest from Atlanta years ago. He had a club band at that club, the Mad Monk in Wilmington, and he had a very fluid, sort of funky style in that. You know, it's not fancy. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's a lot of it is just pentatonic box with a flat 5 and maybe a 6, 2 and 6. You know, all that thrown in, but. There's just a swag. It has a little bit of a swagger thing about it, you know, that I've always thought was cool.
Yeah. Well, Audley, I really appreciate you letting us come to your home and taking the time to tell your story. And it was a real pleasure and an honor.
Yeah, the pleasure and honor are all mine.
Yes.
Seriously, yeah.
Thank you, Audley.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man.